Happy holidays, and there's no better way to celebrate the holiday season than showing you the best tactics in Football Manager 26. There's actually a couple of tactics, and I'm going to go over them, tell you why they are so good, show you how good they are, and then plug them in with Arsenal and Wolves in a Premier League season just so you can see how well they perform. But if you're wondering, Zealand, how do you know these tactics are so good? Well, that's where FM Arena comes into play. It's a website and community that tests tactics at high numbers on a database that is designed to isolate the ability of the tactic to help you win. And this right here is the best tactic on FM Arena. This is called the Diabolic. It's a strikerless 5-2-3 or 4-3-4 tactic. And there are honestly a lot of lessons that you can learn about tactics in FM26 by observing what this and the other tactics do well. Don't worry, I'm also going to show you the best tactic that isn't a back five, and I'm going to show you the best tactic that actually uses a striker. Those are different things. But there is a lot to learn from observing a tactic that does so well in the match engine. For one, incredibly aggressive in possession. Inside winger, shadow striker, inside forward, attacking midfielder, channel midfielder. I mean, there's basically no resting cover here, I guess because you're okay with the three defenders, but you have two, not one, two overlapping center backs going on here. But then out of possession, there's a pretty big adjustment. The wing backs drop back. You have a flat back five. These guys go all the way back to defensive midfield, and you almost have no outlet at all. You have no outlet players. You have winger, attacking midfielder, winger across the front of the formation. But all great tactics are really made in the instructions. And this is a very direct tactic. We have much higher tempo, more direct passing, and much narrower, putting long ball pressure on the center of the defense. That's how this is designed to play. Pretty vintage elite tactic stuff with work the ball into the box, also discouraging long shots where possible. Encourage dribbling is fun, and a low crossing style. The focus is on progressing the ball through the flanks, and the passes are designed to go into space. And it's a short play through the defense offensive distribution system. So you get the ball out to the center backs and they're trying to hit it long into space. But here is where things get buck wild. Very different than they have been in Football Manager before. The line of engagement is a high press, but the defensive line is much lower. It can't go any lower. But the defensive line behavior is to step up. You're basically defending in two parts. You've got your front three pressing, and then all of a sudden your kind of back seven is just dropping into Narnia. But they hold there. Counter press more often, get stuck in. They're even pressing short goalkeeper distribution. And not only is it an extremely low line of defense, it's inviting crosses. It's simply counterintuitive to the way Football Manager has worked in the past, and yet obviously, it works. I plugged this tactic in, changed nothing else, allowed the staff to do nothing else, simulated the season, and got 94 points in a league championship. Obviously, winning the league championship by just 5 points doesn't seem amazing, but we did score 120 goals in 38 matches, while conceding 34, which is the second best in the league. It's an 86 goal difference. Also, won the Champions League and the FA Cup, like the full-blown treble in the opening season here. The particularly dominant player was Bukayo Saka. Saka, of course, is playing inside forward off the right in this system, scored 36 goals in the Premier League with 25 assists. He had basically the best Premier League season of all time. How about this? The opening goal of the Champions League final. Arsenal against PSG. PSG's obviously playing a high pressure style of defense, so they've come forward, and you've ended up with what is 5 Arsenal players pressed up against the back line. Those are your two wing backs and your strikerless front three. Because there isn't much distance there, the center backs are able to make a connection with part of that front five. At which point, one of the two midfielders is going to be able to move essentially unmarked into space, and that would be Declan Rice. This breaks the team open, and all of a sudden PSG is scrambling to try to defend. Rice walks it in, and who does he find but overlapping center back Piero hero Hincapi, who just blasts the ball into the back of the net. Now, the most important thing is that even though there are two overlapping center backs here, the other one, which would be Ben White in this case, has stayed back. Only the overlapping center back on the side of the attack has decided to launch forward. Now, obviously, you're pretty exposed to the counter, but as we know, Football Manager counters are not necessarily the most lethal thing, right? The AI in terms of what the players are going to do isn't 100% on board. So I can understand how being able to flood players forward once you have good possession in a good position is incredibly dangerous. And obviously, no team's going to be able to account for the late run from a center back in this case. What about against a team that's playing a low block? Well, even though it's strikerless, the roles in Football Manager 26 clearly allow you to still make runs behind the line. You see this bit of build-up play that just happened. Gabby Martinelli's now going to play the ball over the top to Martin Odegaard, who's making that run in behind the defense anyways, even though there's not as much room for him to be able to do it. Now, where are the goals conceded from in this tactic? Well, obviously there isn't a great rest defense. So in this 2-2 draw against Bournemouth, the first goal comes from getting countered. But most interestingly is how this plays with the high press, prevent goalkeeper distribution, and then also the incredibly deep line. And it's playing out basically the way that I said it would. You know, I hate to be that guy that knows things. Now, honestly, I had no idea how this would play out because I've never gone for something with this much of a gap before. I would have never thought of it. But this front three is applying a little bit of pressure while your two defensive midfielders are holding tight, and you really have a flat back five that then, because of the incredibly aggressive pressing mentality, when the ball goes near them, they attack it like a pack of chihuahuas. And then the goal scoring chance actually comes after a turnover, which Bournemouth is able to take advantage of. But see how the deep line plays against good teams. We look at this 3-2 loss against Manchester City. The first goal can be pretty easily attributed to the fact that the back line is too deep, right? This is just being able to get the ball in deep across to Erling Haaland that you're not able to prevent because you're not pushed up enough. The second goal, remarkably, is still just a counter of sorts. A very quick move, and a team of great quality like Manchester City is going to be able to pull off. But during this third goal, we're able to really study the movement of this defense. And you can see as the ball swung back and forth, that block of a back seven stays disciplined. One of the big takeaways for me is that even though the wingbacks have been moved back to the fullback position, on this play, you see that the fullback is still able to kind of step forward and engage. I believe that this, and kind of what we were looking at earlier, has something to do with the fact that it's on step up in terms of that defensive line mentality. So when they have the opportunity to step up and engage instead of dropping off and letting them have the ball, even though they're sitting deep and they've come all the way back to the fullback position, they are still stepping up to engage. We see it here again. We see the fullbacks stepping up to engage, and even though you're on this incredibly deep line, they're not giving too much space. Now, the danger, of course, is you can give this space in behind here if they have somebody like a channel forward that can make the run, and that's something you'd have to look out for. You see the level of quality required to produce the goal for Manchester City here is incredibly high if they're trying to go through the middle of the pitch. Unfortunately, for our brave Arsenal heroes in this simulation, Manchester City is more than capable of producing that quality. It's a nasty goal. So you start to see how this could actually work in an incredibly effective way. Because while you still are inviting some pressure, you're honestly not inviting nearly as much as I would have thought, and you're mitigating some of the issues that usually come from dropping your back line so deep. And you're giving players like Erling Haaland almost no room to work with directly over the top. But how does this tactic work with the worst team in the Premier League, right? Anything can work with a good team. Well, we ran it for 38 matches with Wolves and finished in fourth. Not only did the team finish in fourth, it scored 93 goals. The issues really appeared on defense, where the Wolves allowed 57 goals, which was good for, top 8 in the league, barely. Defensively, anyways. And in studying this 4-1 loss to Arsenal, of course, the team we used to be, it's clear that that deeper line is obviously causing more problems. Like in this second goal, just getting beat to the spot. And the other thing to consider is there isn't a good rest defense in this tactic, so when you turn the ball over, the fact that your team is less talented means you're going to turn the ball over more. You're very exposed, like this goal. So there might be ways to tweak this tactic to make it even more effective for teams that are not expected to do well. Lower the tempo, maybe add some time wasting, use specific player instructions to try and avoid turnovers from your particularly bad players. But obviously, even though you're giving up some goals, you're not upset with this result. But what if you don't want to use a back five? Well, I have just the tactic for you. The best non-back five tactic in the entire FM Arena database right now. That would be the Argus 26. This is what it looks like with our Wolves team. The Argus scores nearly as high as the tactic we just looked at, but it uses only 2 center backs instead of 3, obviously. And it has a couple of interesting idiosyncrasies. We're working with 3 central to defensive midfielders that on the defensive role, they all step back to be defensive midfielders entirely. We're also looking at an attacking mentality. The last one only had positive. In possession, attacking midfielder, channel midfielder, defensive midfielder, couple of inside forwards and a shadow striker. Obviously no overlapping center backs, so just ball playing center backs on both sides. Then out of possession, you've got a flat back 4, 2 defensive midfielders and a dropping defensive midfielder who becomes a 3rd center back in defense. And then what we're finding is a pretty standard front strikerless 3 here. But we start to discover some trends in the best tactics in the game. Much higher tempo, more direct passing, a much narrower attacking width, low crosses, encouraged dribbling. In fact, it is entirely the same when it comes to these instructions. And that includes out of possession, with the exception that the press is even more aggressive. This is turned up to much more, which it was not on the previous tactic, the Diabolic. But everything else there is the same. You're just presenting a different shape just in case you don't have enough good center backs. Now, in just one season of simulation, this got Wolves into 7th in the league, which obviously is something they'd really take in real life, so maybe you should try these out. But I was really interested to study the performance of the midfielders in this tactic, and they continue to throw themselves up against the back line, as you can see in this highlight. It seems that the strikerless is really an excellent counter to teams playing high lines. Obviously, as we've studied, it works against lower blocks, but when teams are playing high lines against you, it just allows you to be much more solid defensively while also still creating all of those runs over the top. And in some cases, confusing the defense because they're coming from deeper. What we see as this ball is advanced, you've got your midfielders absolutely sending it up the field. There's tons of pressure that the defense has to deal with, and you just hit a beautiful sideways long ball to try and open them up. But once you're in possession, these 2 midfielders on those rolls are gone. And as long as you don't turn the ball over in those tight spaces, you're gonna walk a goal in like this. Arsenal, of course, won the league again. This time scoring 125 goals. So removing one of those center backs and basically turning them into a midfielder ends up working well. Now, I obviously wanted to study the way this tactic defended as well with the dropping center back, and you can see it's still a pretty narrow back 4 until the ball gets too deep. This is our dropping center back. It's supposed to be anyways. It's Subamendi. And once the ball gets into that position, then he drops into a center back spot. So that's how that dropping center back works. Before the ball progresses too far down the field, he stays in a midfield role, which is something interesting to me. I just never knew. Now, he doesn't defend this particular play particularly well, but in my opinion, that allows this tactic to have a little bit more forward pressure defensively because you've got more of a presence in that midfield to cut off those passes. But at the expense of leaving you exposed to the type of ball that opened up this goal, that over the top into the corner that you're not able to cover as well because you only have 4 on the back line instead of 5. But what about the best tactic with a striker? That is this baby right here. It's called the 3-4-3 invertide. Now, in possession, you're looking at, basically a 3-4-3 with a couple of defensive midfielders that are on box to box, wing backs, inside forwards, a channel forward, and 3 ball playing center backs, where defensively everybody drops except for the defensive midfielders who stay in the same place. And you have a target center forward. In a lot of ways, this is a much more normal feeling tactic, but we still see that high press and much lower defensive line. Counter press much more often with the pressing. They don't go after short goalkeeper distribution, and once again, they do invite crosses. In possession, we see a lot of the same tropes, more direct, much higher, much narrower. In fact, the only difference that I can see between this and the other ones is distribute quickly is on for the goalkeepers. Outside of that, this set of instructions seems to be one that very consistently produces results. And what I'm looking for here is the ability to get strikers to score goals, because it's clear that strikers in systems that include strikers, which in real life is basically every system, struggle to score goals at quite the same clip as those strikerless formations. Now, in the simulation, we've got Wolves finishing 7th again. again, but they've come in with 5 less points than the last tactic we were looking at. I think that indicates something very important to take away here. All of these tactics that are tested on FM Arena are tested basically in a vacuum. You're playing against a bunch of other teams that have the exact same players with the exact same ability. It's like a blank canvas. It's tactic v tactic. But no football manager save is a blank canvas. And that means that a team, Wolves in this case, is going to be better constructed to play in certain formations. So even if a tactic is better than the other one, you might be able to find a worse tactic that is better for your team. Because in the tactic tester, this tactic did significantly worse, but obviously, it's not statistically significant to just have one simulated season. But in real life, you're only playing that season one time. And this Wolves team nearly did as well with a tactic that is allegedly much worse. And the striker, Jurgen Strand Larsen, tied for 7th for most goals in the league. He was the leading scorer. So this is a tactic that opens up opportunities for strikers. And here's a typical Strand Larsen goal with this tactic. You have Doherty, who's able to go wide. Anytime you have, kind of advanced wingbacks, not the actual role advanced wingbacks, but wingbacks that are pushed up in that in-possession tactic, they can get to the end line, get that ball back across, and then you've got your striker there to kind of poach it. Physical presence, off-the-ball timing, finishing ability, and first touch. Now, he slapped this tactic on Arsenal, and once again, they have won the league. They did it with 5 wins in a row to finish the season to get ahead of Liverpool and Aston Villa, who were in the conversation. Life imitates art. But you can see how this tactic changes things statistically. Declan Rice ends up being the guy with the most key passes, while Jurrien Timber ends up being the guy with the most assists. Gyökeres, the striker, is the leading goal scorer all of a sudden. We don't see Bukayo Saka even on this list. There he is. He had 4 goals in 10 appearances. He got hurt. In fact, this was not a good tactic to play with Arsenal because the game itself did not select Bukayo Saka to be a starter in this tactic. It was Odegaard, Martinelli, and Gyökeres is the front 3. So what have we learned? Deep defensive lines are okay. They're not the worst thing in the world. In fact, they can be incredibly effective when combined with intense amounts of pressure. This tactic doesn't even have the step-up defensive line behavior activated. High-tempo, narrow offense is still in vogue. Flat back 5s defensively are in. And strikerless is in. Big time. But maybe the most important takeaway of all for me is being more comfortable moving players forward and backward, not just with roles, but with their position in the in-possession and out-of-possession tactics, because every single one of these involves players moving in that way. And that shows that there are opportunities available for you to tweak and to find that right player in that right moment to push forward in the in-possession tactic. But obviously the game is just starting to get cleaned up and get closer to its full potential, so I'm sure this stuff will continue to evolve, but the initial feedback is in, and the old in-possession, out-of-possession, it's worth messing with. I'll see you on stream, where I will attempt to apply some of the knowledge I've acquired, but with my own twist. I'm not just gonna copy the best tactics, I'm gonna make my own best tactic. Come on. Or I'm gonna die trying. We might lose.